And welcome back to Capital Tonight. So every campaign season, millions of dollars are spent on TV ads in hopes of wooing voters to support one candidate over another. But it actually isn't just the candidates themselves funding these barrage of 30-second clips that are clogging the airwaves during the silly season. Through what's known as an independent expenditure, political parties and committees can also spend on advertising as long as their efforts are not officially coordinated with a candidate's campaign. Now, thanks to a January U.S. Supreme Court ruling, corporations and labor unions are no longer banned from doing the same. Last week, we launched this new segment we're calling Ad Nauseam, and for our second installment, we'll be delving into that decision with my next guests. They are Susan Lerner, she is the Executive Director of Common Cause New York, and Bill de Blasio, the New York City Public Advocate. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Hi.
Hi. It's great to see you. So, Susan, let's get started with you. Could you just give us a brief overview of what the Citizens United ruling did and what it might mean for New York?
Well, the Citizens United ruling was as much of a shocker to lawyers in this area as the Bush versus Gore decision was in 2000. The U.S. Supreme Court took what should have been a fairly innocuous case that was set to clarify some portions of federal election law and grabbed it, changed it, and turned it into a really startling assault on campaign finance regulation. Basically, the ruling was that corporations and unions, which in our system at the federal level and in numerous states around the country are either in the federal system and over 20 states prohibited from making campaign contributions to candidates, and in New York limited in terms of the campaign contributions they can make. For the first time, flying in the face of 100 years of well-settled law, constantly reinterpreted and reaffirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court, this radical Supreme Court decided that corporations had the same rights to speak in politics as natural persons, you and me, human beings. This is revolutionary.
I get the feeling, Susan, that you don't agree with this ruling.
I think it's a dreadful ruling. I think that it is really an activist court gone wild.
Well, now, okay, so let's bring you in, Bill. You actually also don't agree with the ruling. You've been taking some steps to get corporations to agree. I would say they're preventative steps to get corporations to agree on the front end not to take advantage of this newfound power that they've got.
That's right, Liz. You know, Susan's exactly right about the extent of this decision, and I think it was a shock to the system. What can you do about it? It happened to be an incredibly broad-reaching decision, which I felt from the first moment would fundamentally change our democracy for the worse. It would basically open the door to money dominating the political system once and for all, and particularly corporate money. What I've tried to do, working from the position of someone who has a seat on the pension board, the NYSERS pension board here in New York City, is say to corporations, look, it's a concern of pension funds all over this country, as well as citizens and reform groups and good government groups. What decisions are you making? Where is your money going? Are you being transparent and open? All of this matters for the democratic process and the electoral process. It matters for shareholders. It matters for consumers. It matters for pension funds. We cannot change our system, turn it on its head, and then not be able to know what's happening. So what we've said to corporations is, one, disclose what you're doing, but two, you know, you don't have to take advantage of all of the provisions decided by the Supreme Court in the Citizens United case. If you think it's wrong, or if you think it's complicated, or if you think your shareholders and consumers may not agree, you can renounce it. And that's what Goldman Sachs did. That's what J.P. Morgan did. That's what Morgan Stanley did just a few days ago. They said, we're simply not going to become involved in this direct electioneering, exactly the newest and I think the most pernicious part of this ruling that allows a corporation to go right into a campaign directly. They're not going to do that.
Hold on. Before you jump in, Susan, here's the question, though. You're seeking these agreements from corporations, but not from labor. Why not?
Oh, we want them from everyone. What I've been doing is bluntly following the money, to borrow the phrase from the Watergate era. You know, following the money, because any one of these corporations, if they really turned on their corporate treasury and used it in the political process, would make the work of the labor movement in politics look absolutely paltry. One example, Morgan Stanley, we worked with them, and just in the last few days they agreed to renounce Citizens United, not to become involved. 1/1000th of their corporate treasury is $175 million. That's enough to put $1 million in literally 175 different House races, Senate races, governor's races. If they wanted to concentrate it, they could spend more money than Andrew Cuomo or a lot of other candidates were able to do in a single race. That's the magnitude of corporate power if it is directed into the political process. So I want, in a perfect world, Liz, all corporations, all unions to renounce it. But in the first instance, particularly these next 4 or 5 weeks, it's crucial that the biggest corporations stay out.
And, you know, we are not without some possibilities to do something within the law. The Supreme Court did leave open some important protections, although, you know, it has monkeyed with this important principle. And the Citizens United decision was expressed in saying that the government is well within its authority to require disclosures of campaign contributions, that the voters have an interest in knowing who's paying for the elections and being well informed, just like a candidate or a contributor has a right to participate. So you have this dynamic tension between what people need to learn and the right of participants in the political process to speak or perhaps to shout by using a lot of money.
Why do you think then that we haven't seen this actually so much, aside from Bill's efforts, why do you think we haven't seen this come into play in New York? We're talking about federal races. I mean, the only thing that we've seen so far, we've seen, of course, the campaign committees as usual, the parties' campaign committees getting involved on behalf of candidates, congressional candidates, but not so much in terms of independent expenditures, although Governor Pataki's got one.
Well, that's exactly the example I wanted to use. You know, his Revere America group is very much involved, for example, in John Hall's congressional district. And from everything we're seeing, they are bringing corporate money and big donor money in on a level we haven't seen before. So it is starting to happen here. Now, it's fair to say there are fewer of these swing elections in New York State than in other parts of the country, but that seat held by Congressman Hall in the Hudson Valley is clearly up for grabs, and there you see George Pataki's group bringing in what I suspect is a lot of corporate undisclosed money to have that kind of impact and try and turn that election.
And we won't know for sure, Liz, unfortunately, until the election is over, because a lot of the money comes in at the very end. And that's when you see the issue-oriented ads that try and hide support or opposition for a candidate around an issue. Call Assembly Member so-and-so and tell him that you like fresh milk is to us what we call a sham issue ad, a disguised electioneering ad that's nominally about an issue, but it's really designed to get the voter to think positively or negatively about somebody who's currently running.
You know, this new revelation, just one quick point, the new revelation, I think New York Times did incredible reporting of this. Americans for Job Security, what a wonderful sounding group. That is a 501c4, which officially means under the tax code they're not supposed to be involved more than 50% in the political process. This group's making a mockery of that notion, clearly bringing in a lot of corporate money and spending it all over this country. No obligation to disclose whatsoever, and this is the kind of thing that my effort, I know Susan's work, is trying to aim at. The public has a right to know who's trying to change the course of these elections with massive expenditures.
So to that end, and unfortunately we are out of time, but I just want to note that you have a website, Bill, and it's publicadvocate.nyc.gov/corporate-spending, and we're going to pop that up on the screen. I want to thank you both for joining us this evening and for your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.